If you're running in a more barefoot shoe, it will encourage a more forefoot plant, because if you go out and run barefoot, you will always land on the ball of your feet. You won't heel strike. Whereas if you have something with a big rocker, a high cushion stack, then you're more likely to overstretch and overstride, and you can heel strike.
Welcome to the Restore to Explore podcast from the Foot Collective. We're on a mission to empower humans to restore their natural health and function from the ground up, so we can all explore movement and life with freedom and confidence.
Sam, great to finally have you on the podcast, mate.
Nice to meet you, mate. It's been a long time coming, hasn't it?
Yeah. It's funny calling you Sam. I just know you as SJC in my mind.
I mean, you've got a few aliases, haven't you? That's it.
Yeah.
You've got a few accounts popping around. The barefoot fun guy. Yeah.
That's the latest one. Yeah. So we've been connected through Instagram for probably years now. I guess a few years. Exchanged a lot of messages, and obviously we just have resonated with each other's approach to movement and physio. We're both physios, obviously, and part of what we're doing with TFC is obviously going straight to the consumer, the person who's interested in improving their foot health, their balance, their movement health in general. And so we're giving as much free education and training as we can to help them take better care of themselves. But we also 100% realize and respect the value of in-person care and people having individualized assessment and guidance and getting a program and checking in regularly along the way. And there's no real way to replace that. So for that reason, we're obviously building this network of people who are aligned with the way we approach things, which is really just an active and empowering approach to physio or therapy and rehab in general. And we obviously really like to highlight people who are doing these things, and you're one of those people, one of our TFC pros. And, it's just good to share the story of practitioners who are doing this, hopefully inspire other practitioners, and also just to help our audience, people listening, to understand what kind of care is out there and what they should really be looking for when it comes to getting care and physiotherapy or rehab in general. So
yeah, nice.
Plenty to dig into today, but I always just like to start with your story. So, how you got into physio, your movement background, how your approach to physio has changed over the years, just however much you're able to give. It doesn't have to go into a full life story, but
here we go. So I guess the best place to start first off is probably how I got into physiotherapy, where I'm from and such. So I'm from a place called Warrington, northwest of England. As a kid growing up, I was a bit of a jack of all trades, master of none with sports. So delved into a lot of sports: golf, football, tennis, cross country running, cycling with my old man. And obviously along the way when I was younger, picked up some injuries, picked up some niggles. But when I was playing quite a bit of tennis, I picked up a specific shoulder injury. Didn't have a clue what it was. Obviously, I was 15 years of age, but went to a few physios, and that's really when physio got put on the map to me, and didn't really get the care. Had a bit of ultrasound, had a bit of soft tissue massage, all that kind of stuff in the early days. Little to no results until I saw the one physio who sort of opened my mind a bit more to sort of strength, movement, rotation of a joint, and so on and so forth. And he started to rehab me, and lo and behold, over some time and some quality rehabbing movement with guidance, he fixed me. And it was the first time where I'd kind of been in a vulnerable state as a kid. When I was injured, all my mates were playing tennis, they were getting better, and I wasn't able to do the thing that I really wanted to do. And that was a tough pill to swallow. And he was the first guy that kind of led me down the path to get injury free. And from that point, it kind of put it on the map to me, and I thought that was a pretty cool thing he did. And that was something then I decided to pursue it. So from there, obviously, fast forward, got my degree at Leeds, and obviously qualified from there. Um, and from that point, I kind of moved into, the National Health Service, the NHS space, did my usual Band 5 rotations, and went through some private work alongside some sporting stuff for Wigan Athletics, sort of delved into that sporting world. But at the time as a young physio, I just felt that there was loads of gaps in my knowledge, and I feel like the curriculum itself for physiotherapy, I don't know what it's quite like in Australia, but I just felt like there's so many topics that I feel you were left in the dark around early on. So then that's when, from that point, I just started trying to explore more for myself. So I got all my qualifications to go out to Australia. I packed my bags and left the country and moved out there. And that was kind of the start for me working with other professionals and like-minded individuals, where I started to understand more about movement, mobility practice, like FRC, for example, functional range conditioning. Um, and through my own practice and my own passion, I then started to sort of explore other avenues of care and ways that I could help people, through anything and everything. And that became a lot easier, I think, when I was able to put myself out of my comfort zone and work with other like-minded professionals. I ended up being across the world. And then that's kind of led me fast forward to where I am today. Um, so yeah, it's been a really exciting journey, and we'll obviously delve a bit deeper into it as we go through it all, I can imagine. Um, but yeah, I look at where I am now and where I was all them years ago, and I can see how people can't quite find their path, maybe.
Yeah, it's interesting because you mentioned that experience you had with the physio who took you through, obviously a more active approach and actually, getting into problem solving as opposed to just, treating the pain with some passive treatments. But then you get excited about, wow, I want to help people do that. You go through a physio degree, but you don't actually get equipped with the knowledge and the skills through that physio degree to help someone with that necessarily. I certainly found that with our degree, there really wasn't a lot of that, I guess, movement-based problem solving. And especially to do with the feet personally, obviously in my line of work, but even just movement in general, I had to learn pretty much everything outside of my physio degree. Obviously, it gives a really good foundational understanding of anatomy, physiology, all of these things that are important. But you definitely have to do a lot of your own research, a lot of your own experimentation on yourself in order to actually figure out, how these systems can work and how these approaches can work. So, has there been any key books or resources or programs or courses that you've done that have kind of informed your approach over the years? Anything that has been particularly helpful for you?
Yeah, so I think, as I said, from a mobility standpoint, that was a huge stepping stone for me. So learning and delving more into sort of, as I say, the functional range conditioning stuff, the FRC work, and then range strength and mobility training, um, was a big eye opener to me. I think um, that was a very sort of eye opening opportunity that I got to work alongside some guys in that field, and I learned a lot from them. And it's helped countless people along the way to do so. Alongside that, it's just the sporting world. I think for me, as I said, spent a lot of time exposing myself to football. I was to say, traveled the world a bit, so I ended up in New Zealand. Managed to work alongside some sort of golfing academy, PGA golf mechanic stuff, as well as the rugby scene, so the big Maori boys over in New Zealand, and just learning off people around me. As far as actual courses, I wouldn't say that I've done much more than the physiotherapy degree, other than the usual, like, countless seminars and podcasts and tuning into everything that other people have got to say. I haven't upskilled myself in any other particular modules, but there's a lot of resource out there. It's just tapping into it and finding it. And I've had the fortunate opportunity to work alongside some great physios that have taken me under their wing and taught me a lot. But I had to go out there and find it. You know, I had to leave the country and travel to Australia, travel to New Zealand, end up working in Japan, same thing again. It's like along that path, I feel like you have to really seek and find it. And that's, I can see how, from a physiotherapy standpoint, that people may lack their lack some knowledge in some very useful areas to help the people around them if they were to stay within their bubble and their circle. And, you know, not boohooing academia and a 3-year course of physiotherapy, because there's only so much you can teach as you're growing up. And a big portion of your career, it's only a tiny portion compared to the vast scale you may be practicing your profession for. So yeah.
Yeah. So let's hone in then on the sort of FRC mobility. You mentioned end range strength training because, you know, for those listening, whether they're a practitioner or not, just someone who's interested in improving their movement. What's the basic premise behind that, and why do you find that valuable, I suppose, in your practice, or how have you found that valuable for yourself?
Yeah, so like the mobility training world, the definition of mobility is just taking any joint through its active range of motion and its available active range of motion. I think that differs in where people get confused with mobility versus flexibility, because flexibility is your ability to move into an end range. So like you may not. So say for example, if we're doing shoulder flexion, you know, our ability to control it through a range would be our active available range, our mobility of the shoulder joint through flexion. But obviously our passive range would be our ability to push it into its end. Sorry, my headphones went off. Without any muscle innovation. So it's just our ability to hold there. And I think a lot of people associate something being tight with it needing to be stretched, with us needing to put stuff into more of a passive range. And in fact, most of that tightness comes from the fact that the muscle is weak and short and actually needs to be more able to control that range of motion. And thus, over time, it will become looser and longer. Okay. So for me, like understanding that idea that controlling your joint through its full range of motion can create more range of motion, was a really important lesson that I learned early on in my career. And then using that philosophy with every joint or every issue can be life changing for people, I guess.
Yeah, the sort of strength through length concept. It's a good point that, you know, when you start to feel the feeling of something being tight, a natural tendency and something, I guess, that we've been culturally sort of not trained to do, but the perspective is, well, if it's tight, then stretch it out.
It needs to be lengthened. Yeah.
And of course, there is a role for passive stretching. Like if you do want to improve your passive range of motion, then passive stretching can help you do that. But you don't necessarily want to do that without also building some active strength and control in that range of motion. And so I think that's a really good point. And from what I haven't done an FRC course, but there are people who I've talked to who have done it. And I think what's cool about it is that it's actually like, well, let's look at, are each of your parts actually working the way that they should be working? Can they move through a full, normal, optimal range of motion for that joint? And if they can't, then, you know, what effect does that have on the joint next to it or the joint above or below? And, you know, what kind of compensations are happening there? And I think addressing the body systematically, obviously, you know, we're not just a bunch of isolated parts, but, you know, looking at things individually and seeing how, you know, the movement of your hip could be affecting the movement of your foot, which is something we talk a lot about, or vice versa. So there's, I think I'd encourage anyone to look into that approach and obviously work with a practitioner like yourself, who's someone who's been trained in it. And from what I see on your Instagram, which is very great content, but you do obviously have a bias towards sort of strength training as an approach towards rehab. So maybe we can just talk about strength training generally. So why is it so important for people to strength train, especially as part of recovering from an injury or some kind of pain condition?
Yeah, and I think strength training and mobility training kind of fall into the same category. So, I mean, anyone that's from a strength training perspective, it has a whole plethora of benefits from physical health to mental health. So, but from more of a rehab perspective, the for most people anyway, depends on the injury, depends on the circumstances. We're talking very broadly here. Strength training after an injury of any sort, whether it be a repetitive strain related injury or whether it be some sort of muscular tear or ligamentous issue or maybe like a ligamentous reconstruction, it's paramount to protecting the joint and protecting your musculoskeletal system. So strength training in any injury is essential for function. So I think from when people sort of talk about rehab and thinking what should be doing for rehab and passive modalities versus active modalities, I think passive modalities have their place in the initial phase to help with symptoms, help with pain relief, to help the person feel more comfortable and give them an opportunity to move better. But at some point, if you're going to want to make long lasting change and want to better yourself and cause positive adaptation, then that needs to be done with some physical stimulus, and that is, as we say, typically strength training.
Yeah, and it's interesting because as physios, or I think physios get a certain reputation for giving some exercises. Obviously, there's the passive approaches, which is massage, manual therapy, ultrasound, things like that. Some of which I believe have their place in certain contexts.
Totally.
But physios kind of get known for giving these, very basic beginner exercises. Like a TheraBand rotation,
a clamshell, honestly,
clamshell, etc. So, and again, maybe certainly in certain people, then that kind of exercise is warranted. But the lack of progression, I think, is a real issue. And just giving someone some clamshells and some TheraBand rotations, maybe that's going to cause an adaptation originally, but then where do they go from there? So I think physios get a bit of a reputation for just giving these exercises that don't work. But how does your approach to strength training kind of differ?
Yeah, well, I think the first part is going back to the course and thinking about physiotherapy as a degree, is that when you start looking into the strength and conditioning world and working alongside some S&C coaches, which you obviously do in that sporting setting, is you kind of start to understand principles such as progressive overloading, for example. And that's something that isn't really taught in the curriculum from a physiotherapy standpoint. And I feel that it's an absolute essential to understand programming and progressing of any strength routine. And the definition of rehabilitation is just training in the presence of an injury. So you're trying to strength train or improve a certain area through exercise, through a positive stimulus, and that needs to be constantly progressed and that needs to be changed over time. And I think the bad reputation has come down to that lack of knowledge in that field and a lack of awareness and understanding, maybe that it's something like a clamshell or like an external rotation will do something in the initial phase, in the early phase. But if you're dealing with a high-end athlete that's putting tremendous force, stress, power through their body, it isn't going to cut, it isn't going to touch the sides. And that same philosophy should be applied to Joe Bloggs, your everyday person, because ultimately they're exposing themselves to far more than that. They normally have hobbies, they have children, they're picking up their kids, whatever the injury may be, and that is a stress and a stimulus on the body. And I think being a bit more thorough in that approach is something that I've always tried to push towards. And as I say, my background has allowed me to do that, learning from these people. But strength training should always be progressive, and so should rehab, and it shouldn't be alienated is any different to strength training.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a really good point. Is sometimes people think about, there's rehab exercises and then there's like strength and performance exercises, but they pretty much should look the same. Maybe your range of motion is different. Maybe the load that you're using is different. There's some parameters that can be different there, but as a general rule, your athletic training can look pretty similar to your rehab training and vice versa.
Yeah.
If you're, the main thing is you're respecting the point at which, like the current capacity of your body. So if you're injured, you might have to dial things back, change things, but it doesn't mean that you have to be doing only rehab exercises. It's sort of just a continuum.
And absolutely, and the end stage of rehab is very, if not the same, to a comprehensive strength and performance program. If you take any foot and ankle injury, for example, in runners, I was reading a study not so long ago on it wasn't a big cohort, but the prevalence of injuries in marathon runners, and each marathon runner got up to 4 injuries in the year. Foot being the highest amount of injuries, I think it was like 23% or whatever it was. But if you look at a foot injury or an Achilles injury, unfortunately, I'm going through an Achilles injury myself about 3 weeks into the process. And in the early phase, you do your calf raises, you do your isometrics, you do your very controlled static movements, and then you start to build in some balance work. You may see people typically balancing on one leg or shifting some weight around. But it's amazing how people become pain free at that point, and then they also just think, okay, now I'll just return to sport. And they are so far off where they need to be to return to sport safely or sport to their hobby safely that I think is the problem between rehab and performance and strength training is that clear divide where it's like, okay, I've done some soleus calf raise work, I've done some straight leg calf raise work, I've just done a bit and now I have no pain, so therefore I can just go back to sport. But actually, you haven't assessed them in a more dynamic and more plyometric jump training setting that is going to be replicating the actual stress and stimulus that the foot goes through in their sport or in their hobby. And so there's a reason why the Achilles tendon is the longest tendon in the human body, right? Because it deals with a hell of a lot of force. And one of the most forces in the human body. So same thing applies. The foot is a platform for the rest of the body to perform from. And in order for it to do that, it needs to be stressed and challenged in its appropriate format, which is going to be to bounce, to jump, to twist, to rotate, to bend, whatever it is that's related to that sport is what it needs to be able to do. And I think that is the difference between conventional rehab and actual performance strength training in the later phases.
Yeah, I think that's such an important point, especially for athletes, obviously, but even for non-athletes, like you say, Joe Bloggs, if you just do your rehab or your physio stuff until your pain goes away and then you stop doing anything and you stop progressing, then you really are setting yourself up for the pain to come back in the same spot or for some kind of issue to pop up somewhere else along the way. Obviously, we're never going to prevent all pain and injuries, but just going until the pain's gone is really limiting.
It's the tip of the iceberg, and I say this to clients all the time. Is if you think of that time scale, that pain scale of where it is you actually feel pain and how much function you've lost before you get pain, then people kind of look and go, okay, you've been reducing your performance or your functionality of the joint or the tendon has been getting weaker over time until the point you've hit pain. And then you hit pain and you flicked onto the other side of it. And that's when you come to see your physio. they help you get back to the other side of the line, so you're pain-free. But actually, there's all this space where you still need to improve your strength and your performance in order for you to not fall back on the other side of that line of pain. There is still a deficit. There's still stuff to be working on. But pain has always been the primary marker that anyone ever comes to see a professional like myself or like you. Like, no one really comes to physiotherapy with no issues of pain.
Yeah, it's a very good point. And we culturally and as a profession, I think, really focus on, okay, how's your pain? Is the pain getting better? Because someone is coming to you with pain as the issue. They're paying you to help them with their pain. And so it's just this big focus on pain, which, you know, kind of makes sense because pain is the thing they want to change. But deeper down, the deeper you dig, they actually want to do something functionally, and the pain is stopping them from doing that or affecting their ability to. And really, the function is what most of us want. Or, you know, even if it's just an emotion, you want to be able to feel at peace or happy and everything, and just be able to move confidently. And so I think people, you kind of need to see people for enough time to get them that experience of progression, and, you know, I can feel myself getting stronger. I can feel this mobility is improving, and they start to value it beyond just the ability for that to improve their pain. They're like, oh, I'm really liking this process of improving my strength. I can, you know, for runners, for example, as you say, then you might actually go from rehab to now you're improving your run times. You're feeling better while you run generally. And so there's a lot more benefits to training beyond just solving or even preventing pain. There's a lot more benefits to sort of physical preparation in that sense.
Yeah, 100%. And as I say, pain is only the tip of the iceberg for these people. And I think if you just focus on pain as the primary, um, is the only thing that you're trying to resolve, then you're always going to fall short. And I think if more people were to think of the bigger picture around, you know, their mechanics and the way they're moving and how to improve that, whether it be through mobility, whether it be through strength, whether it be through flexibility training, whatever it may be. But if people were able to keep on top of themselves a bit more and be more proactive in their approach, I think it would be we'll see far less chronic issues or repetitive strain injuries or persistent pain because we're taking control of it and taking more ownership over it.
Yeah, rather than outsourcing to someone
Well,
else
it's just
to sort of to fix it. Yeah. And I think something that people run into is, you know, it is expensive. It's an investment to continue, you know, even to get therapy or rehab in the first place from a professional. And then especially to continue past the point of pain, it's like, well, I'm paying for these sessions and I'm, you know, I'm not necessarily, my pain's solved. So it's just a mental switch of like, well, now that money and that time is an investment in preparing you for future. Otherwise, you know, you just kick the can down the road and say, okay, well, my pain's gone. And then, you know, in 6 months or a year, I'm going to spend another $500 just getting back past that pain line, rather than just investing now and learning the skills so that maybe next time I have something pop up, I don't have to go and see someone. I just know the skills of how to address it myself.
And I think you know, I always like to use a bit of a time scale with the clients of mine. So I always like to say to them that, you know, if they've come to you with, I don't know, let's just say a tendinopathy or some repetitive strain injury, and you've worked with them for 3 months, and at the end of the 3 month cycle, you know, their pain's much better, they've settled, they've returned to running or doing the hobbies that they love. So then at that point, it's kind of going, okay, like, tip, you know, that's our job done. That's your 5-star review. Like, bye bye. But I always like to say to the clients at that point is that flip that rehab process on its head, and you've got another 3 months of work with or without me. You know, typically without, But I've given you all the skills and the prerequisites and the education, the knowledge that you have here to keep your Achilles, your knee, your foot, whatever it may be, happy and healthy. This style of training is something that you need to try and consider incorporating into your routine. Maybe not as frequently as an intense rehab plan where you may be doing it 3-4 times a week, but at least then taking some ownership and keeping on top of that issue to continue to better yourself so you don't, as I said, flick back over that other side of pain. And I think that's just an important message, I think, for anyone that's dealing with recurrent injuries or maybe going through an injury now, is that if you're constantly striving to try and improve yourself and your body, your tendon health, your muscular health, your joint health, then the chances of you flicking back over that side of pain is less. It's not for certain that you will never end up back there because injuries happen to the best of us, but you're giving yourself the best opportunity not to end up on the other side of that pain threshold or line.
We wanted to take a quick break from the episode to let you know about our ultimate free foot health resource. If you're listening, you've probably already started the journey towards improving your foot and movement health, but if you're still wearing conventional shoes most of the time, that's anything cushioned, heeled, narrow or rigid, it's kind of like taking one step forward and 2 steps back. Knowing what shoe is right for you though can be super confusing. That's why we made the Guide to Foot Freedom. We've taken everything our team of foot health experts have learned over the years and synthesized it into one handy manual, packed with all you need to know about unleashing the natural power of your foundation. You'll learn how to understand your feet, the truth about modern footwear, the 5 F's for finding natural footwear, plus a step-by-step guide with training videos to help you assess your foot function and improve it so you can safely and seamlessly transition into shoes that will finally give your feet freedom. The best part is, like I said, it's absolutely free. Just head to thefootcollective.com and click Learn to find the free ebook, The Guide to Foot Freedom. You'll find the link in the show notes. Now back to the episode.
Yeah. And the key there is building the skills that allow you to continue doing that over time. And that
Education.
takes that education, takes that investment of time and energy, and money to build those skills, because we're not all taught that growing up as part of our school curriculum. But it's
helpful.
very, very, very worth it in the long run. Yeah, maybe one day physical PE classes, physical education will actually be physical education.
We'll actually give you some proper education on how to look after your body, how to actually look after your joints. But a long time.
we'll work on it. Yeah. So you mentioned running, and you're obviously a runner yourself. You work with runners pretty frequently. So yeah, what are some of the most common running injuries you see? There's a stat that gets thrown around, which I believe is true, but I think it's like 80% of runners will incur some kind of injury each year, which is extremely high and very weird considering that running is, one of the most natural movements of the human body.
Primitive, right? Yeah.
Yeah. So what do you think's going on there? What are some of the contributing factors to running injuries that people should be aware of and thinking about? And what's your sort of approach to running? That's probably a huge question, but let's
let's just go into it. So personal experience, and obviously seeing a lot of runners come through the door, and I think there's a wide spectrum, so this doesn't fit everyone. But I think the first and main point is too much too soon. I think if you start at the bottom as a complete novice as a runner, there's some great resources out there like these Couch to 5K apps and such. But for some reason, I don't know why, but because the 5K is like the smallest distance, it's like on the event chart, that everyone kind of thinks that like any recreational runner has to do a 5K, like regardless, and they have to run it continuously. And if they walk for a bit, it's like the ultimate shame. Like you can't run a 5K. So I think for like recreational runners and having that distance in mind, I think people are just going out there and they're just shoes on, out the door, hit the road. I have to do a 5K. Now, most people always try and better themselves as we always do. So you go out and you hit a 5K faster, and then you try and break your PB the next time. You try and break your PB the next time, and the idea is that you just do. You overload your tendons, you overload your muscles, and they can't deal with the stress of running, especially if you live in a sedentary job, and you're not doing anything broader, whether it be hobbies, whether it be strength training and such. So I think for me, the most typical thing I see is, your desk worker, 9 to 5, busy life, couple of kids, and they just need to rush out the house and get the run done. They need to get out, get in 25 minutes, 30 minutes, and get back as quick as they can. And I think for me, the most common thing I see is exactly that. It's these people getting injured just because they're running too hard, too quick. So I think
Yeah.
from a running standpoint, it's important to think of that 80-20 rule and try and make most of it very steady. Like most of your runs should be very slow, and then add in some interval and tempo work from there.
And where do you see as the role of technique, running technique, in, I guess, both injury and the performance, and how does that sort of line up for you?
Yeah, so when we talk about like running gaits, I I don't tend to touch people's gait. Like I don't mess around with it for the most part because the way that I think there's a lot a lot lower hanging fruit that you can do with someone is start altering their gait pattern first. And as I say, that's by educating them on their strategy towards running, and help them to program and plan something that's more sustainable for them and more realistic for their body and their capacity and needs. And then incorporating some form of strength work in their plan as well to build a more resilient lower limb, pelvis, hips, back, knees, whatever needs to be done, rib cage, and so on. Um, and then just educating on footwear as well. I think that's a huge topic, in the foot and running world, and various shoes have various properties: wider toe boxes, narrower toe boxes, more heel raise, less heel raise, higher stack heights of cushion, lesser stack heights of cushion, all the way to minimalistic shoes. And that is going to change your gait. If
Mm.
you're running in a more barefoot shoe, it will encourage a more forefoot plant, because if you go out and run barefoot, you will always land on the ball of your feet. You won't heel strike. Whereas if you have something with a big rocker and a high toe stack, a high cushion stack, then you're more likely to overstretch and overstride, and you can heel strike. And there's not necessarily anything wrong with that, but it's a variation, isn't it? You can change your gait through something as simple as your footwear. So
Mm.
from that is the way that I would try and manage. From there, I may look at and may then start to break down if you've done all these things and go, okay, let's actually look at your gait. How much do you overstride? Do we need to start encouraging some cadence, like a higher cadence in someone's running gait to encourage more of a forefoot planting? But I think there's indirect ways you can do that, I think is what I'm trying to say,
Yeah.
rather than
Yeah,
just get in someone's head and say you need to do this for your gait.
yeah. I tend to be on that same way of thinking in terms of trying not to overwhelm something. Okay, well, now while you're walking or while you're running, you need to think about this, this,
Yeah,
this, and people
it
just
gets
start
messy.
overwhelming. And it's some simple cues that not that I'm a running coach or anything, but usually something that I think
Neither am I.
about that's been helpful for me is, quiet steps or quiet
Yeah, really
interaction
good.
with the ground, because that just is an indicative of how much force you're putting into the ground and absorbing from the ground. So if you have really loud footsteps that are clap, clap, clapping along, then it's probably a sign that you're not really absorbing the force from the ground as well as you could or should be. And obviously overstriding, I would say people tend to overstride more so with a heel strike, but you can certainly overstride with a midfoot or
Yeah,
forefoot strike
sure.
as well, both of which are going to again, it's always hard to say, oh, that's going to cause pain or injury, because, as you say, the biggest thing is probably how is your body adapting to that. If you gradually progressed that, maybe you would do it fine. But I think eventually those kinds of patterns, like an overstride pattern, that'll limit your performance at some point. So, usually runners want not just to prevent injuries, but also to improve their performance. So, I think there's definitely a role for technique sort of coaching. And do you ever, you mentioned you're not a running coach, do you ever outsource for that kind of thing? Do you get people to, get into running technique coaching, or do you have any sort of people that you go to?
I think, yeah, I don't, in terms of like running coaches, normally the people that I'm dealing with aren't on like a professional elite level. It's very much a recreational runner. So I don't have anyone where I'm like, you need to go see this running coach, because, from like a gait analysis perspective. Most of the people that come through the clinic are like local, in the local run clubs, and just enjoy running and want to achieve their goal, whether it be your sub 2:45 marathons or running your first marathon or your first 10K. And I think from that gait perspective, I would always consider and I will always look, obviously, as you should. But yeah, I think when it comes to specific gait training, I just think for these people, there is a lot of other stuff that you can kind of tap into before you start trying to change the way that someone runs. Because I think I've tried to do bits of it myself, and it's a hard discipline. You've really got to coach yourself on it, haven't you?
Yeah, and it's also, it can be very hard to do consciously. And something I believe and have, I guess, found to be true is that, when you improve the function of the parts, like the mobility, the strength, the coordination, then your body is a self-organizing system. We never really get taught to walk or run. We just sort of do it by trial and error. And so as long as your body parts are working, essentially the way they should, then a lot of your technique can sort of come through trial and error. And, the other thing that I believe is that there is not necessarily an exact right or wrong way to move, walk, or run. There's just different strategies for different contexts. You'll run differently going uphill than you will going downhill. You'll run differently on a trail versus a flat level ground. It's mostly about the adaptability and being able to change your strategy based on the context.
Yeah, 100%. And as I said with the footwear thing, like you slip someone in a different shoe, and it's amazing how it can transform the way they run. And I think that is an important point about shoe rotations and stuff, is that it's there to be trialed. And if something isn't working for you and there's a potential break in the mechanical chain or the gait that you have, then it's always about problem solving and altering to better perform. And whether that is, with most people say about before, about like loud steps and flapping, are they losing force to the ground? Is it a vertical oscillation? If they're bouncing up and down from a pelvis perspective, is it because they're just lacking the pelvic control? Is it comes to a point when they just completely crumbling because of fatigue? If so, you could improve their gait by strengthening their pelvis, their stability, their core, loading that into plyometrics and getting them to go again and seeing if there's any variance and change. And yeah, that same thing applies with anything from a strength perspective. If you break, as you say, if you work on the weak parts or the weak links, then that's gonna have a positive effect on the gait when the body self-organizes itself and realizes now it can move in a more fluid pattern.
Yeah. Cool. And you've been working on a Run Strong sort of program. So do you want to just touch on that and what the sort of idea is there?
Yeah. So the Run Strong program that I'm putting together is a 12-week program that is designed to help runners run stronger and be more mobile. Losing the name, but it's I put the plan together because I get a lot of questions around running. I do a lot of running myself, and around what do I do to train running? What does my strength programs look like? What do my mobility programs look like? And I teach it often for hobbyists um, that enjoy their running and they want to keep running. As we said, like running is not just a physical practice, but a mental one also. And running is a very important part of people's lives. And when that's taken away by injury, it's amazing how people really feel like they're missing a part of themselves from a social aspect, from a mental health aspect, from a physical standpoint. So the plan's designed for anyone from beginners to advanced that want to improve their running performance and learn a bit more about the key areas of how to do so. And we just break down various movement patterns and educate you on how to progress and push yourself forward so that it can transfer onto your running and hopefully help to prevent injuries, maybe improve or resolve some pesky little niggles you may have, and then hopefully make you a better runner and hit some PBs.
Cool. Yeah, I think it's really valuable to have resources like that because you have worked with a lot of runners, obviously, and you'll end up doing. Obviously, everyone is a little bit different. You do have to individualize, but you will end up doing pretty much the same kinds of things with anyone because we're all humans, and running, involves the need for strength and capacity in all very similar areas: your calves, your ankles, your hamstrings, etc. Everything through the lower limb. So just having a good broad spectrum program that teaches people those principles could solve a lot of issues for a lot of people, or maybe even prevent them having to have the issues. Or if they do need more individualized assessment and guidance, then at least they've already built some of the skills. You're not starting from scratch. They've already built some of the awareness and skills and capacities that will then help that process become a lot more efficient when they do seek help from, say, you or someone else.
Yeah, 100%. And I say it's really hard when you're creating these programs is to create a one size fits all because the reality is you can't.
Yeah.
But trying to, as I say, educate people on, the ways that they can help themselves. For the very inexperienced, that's quite easy. To the more advanced, you may give them some sort of tips and tricks, some ways that they can progressively overload themselves, or just give them a new lens, just a different plan to try from my experience and what I've picked up over the years that I've been qualified. Um, but yeah, I think anyone and everyone can benefit from that. Um, and as I say, you can't please everyone in that world when it comes to programming in a sort of, as I said, in a universal online setting. Um, that isn't bespoke to that person, but you can give them hopefully some more clarity and education.
Yeah. And what kind of barriers do you find? Because, excuse me, I think a lot of the classic issue with physios with maybe a bit more of an active or exercise focused approach is compliance or adherence. Do you find that you're attracting the type of clients that want to do that approach? Do you ever find that there's barriers to actively getting something done? Do your clients come in just wanting to be fixed by you? How do you navigate that whole
Yeah,
situation?
yeah, it's an interesting one. Good question. Um, I think I think it's around the beliefs of what the person in front of you feel they want versus what they need are two different things. And I think it's around just building trust and rapport with the person in front of you, and just reasoning with them. There's people that come in and they'll just say they've got a bad back, and when it gets massaged or manipulated or poked or prodded, that it makes it feel better. But they've also had the problem for 3 years, and that if they keep doing this stuff once a month, it kind of keeps it at bay. So I think it's around this education and just kind of feeding a little bit of what they need, what they want you to have, but then also slowly starting to educate them on the stuff that's actually going to help them, or try to help them. And my approach is I'm not so brutal with that. I try and feed and just nurture them and just try and bring them round to a new lens and a new strategy, because the ultimate reality is if someone's coming through the door for physiotherapy or for osteopathy or chiropractic, whatever it may be, the idea is that you need to educate them and get them out the door. Like it's not the best business model, is if you want to get them out as quick as you can. And from a business perspective, that's also the problem. Like as in they want you to stay on their books, and it's a very sure way for me for that to happen. However, it's just morally wrong, and it shouldn't be something that is in the industry. And unfortunately, it very much is. And we've probably all heard the stories about they've been seeing someone for X amount of time and they've still got the same problem. So I think educating them is the most important thing, and just keep trying to reason with them on what you're trying to do is the long-term fix and the long-term strategy. And if they're able to conduct themselves and partake in the rehab and slowly start to invest in themselves, then they will get long-term results and resolution of their pain and be happier and healthier in themselves. And I always say to my clients that if they walk through my door and see me or my work colleagues for 45 minutes, that is a tiny fraction of their day and an even lesser time of their week. So what are they doing for the other 99.5% of the time of that week? Because that's the bit that we need to hit. That's the bit that we need to educate them on the stuff that they need to be doing that's going to help them long term. And it isn't just about physiotherapy. It isn't just about doing some rehab exercises. Let's think a bit more holistic. We've got sleep, stress, nutrition. There's so many other variables that we need to educate on as well as just a bit of mobility training or a bit of strength training or some stretches.
Yeah, I love it. And that is it's a fine balance to create, because if someone comes in, they're like, oh, I just really want a back rub, and you start going, you need to address your movement, your sleep, like I'm
going to be out the
and I'm
door
not
in
going to give you a
45
rub.
minutes. Never
Yeah.
coming back.
Then they won't come back. So if you can find that balance between, okay, look, I'm going to give a little bit of what you are wanting, start drip feeding you some of the things that you need, you build that relationship. It actually gives you the opportunity to help them come to the party there. Whereas if you overwhelm someone straight away with all of this stuff, then it's like, well, I'm just going to go to someone who's going to give me my back rub, basically.
And the problem is that people get defensive, right?
Yeah.
If someone believes that is going to help them, and you go, no, it's wrong, this is going to help you, then straight away you're to and fro, and that you've already talked them into disproving you, because instantly they resent you for not giving them what they want, and they're going to try your stuff and go, oh, that didn't work, so it's a waste of time. So I think you've got to you just got to reason with people, and you've got to really try and try your best to open their mind and give them a new viewpoint or um, another approach that they could try for some long-term resolution, because ultimately they're coming to you because they've seen countless physios or countless osteos or countless health practitioners, and they haven't got any better.
Yeah, and it's a process, and it takes time, and like you said, building that relationship. But you do have an opportunity to help guide someone along a path. But you're not going to do that by sort of.
That's the most fun part, right? That's the most fun bit. Yeah. But it's, as I say, it's just building rapport and getting people to believe in what you do, and that you have their best interest in mind.
Yeah. The belief is, and the mindset is huge.
Yeah, and getting people to rehab consistently, that's a battle in itself, right? I'm sure you've seen it many times, people with busy lives, trying to get them to rehab 3 times a week can be challenging, especially it's something they don't want to do, right? Like rehab is dull. We've all been injured, I should call myself a constantly injured physio, the amount of times I'm injured. And I go through the process often, and I'm in a rehab setting most days of the week. And if I didn't have clients doing the same rehab that I had to do, because I just do it with them now, so that it is a challenging, and I still find it boring. So it is incredibly challenging, and especially when you've got to tailor it and fit it into your extremely busy lifestyle.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think having those experiences of injuries and rehab as practitioners, it gives us more empathy for what our clients go through, and just obviously more experience of how to do things, how to demonstrate things, how to, you know, it all adds up, and it makes you, I think, a more
Well,
effective practitioner.
you learn from experience as well, don't you? So I've picked up some nasty injuries. I've dislocated my left shoulder, five, six times. I've had repetitive
Wow.
strain injuries, tendinopathies, all of it. So it's amazing how as soon as you've had the injury as well, and you go through it, I kind of look at my own approach and self-reflection and go, was that stuff that I was giving the best approach? Because actually, these things work better for me. Like, should I be doing a
Yeah,
bit more of that? And that is, as I say, it's never a one size fits all, but you always learn from experience, right? And I think
definitely,
um, living it and going through it definitely does that.
for sure. And tell me about the movement room, MVMT room. What's going
Yeah,
on there? I haven't. I know last time we had a proper chat, I think you were just around
yeah.
starting it. So yeah,
Yeah,
what's the go
wow.
there?
That's how long it's been. It's been like 3 years now. It's crazy. So the movement room is a strength and mobility gym, run half by myself and another chap called Alex. Alex JP Fitness is his Instagram handle. And he is a certified mobility FRC coach. I'm not, he is. And yeah, we set up that space together on the back of me coming back from France during COVID. Perfect time to set up a business. And yeah, and we set up that gym studio alongside the physio clinic. And that was just from my time working abroad, working around Australia and New Zealand mainly, where there was a direct relationship between the physios and the personal trainers and S&C coaches. And you see that very much in the sporting world. It's this collab. And for some reason, everywhere else in the private setting, it's very disbanded and they were very separated. So we created the movement room with the idea that it was like-minded professionals under one roof doing the same job. And Alex is a very good strength and mobility and coach and nutritionist, and is also incredible at rehabbing because it's cut from the same cloth. And just because he doesn't have the label as a physiotherapist doesn't mean he isn't able to do that job. And vice versa. I think looking at myself into the S&C space and the personal training and coaching space, um, my background has allowed me to help people in that setting to perform better, to move better, to feel better in their body. And I think that's where that collab comes in very well, is that Alex coaches me on the mobility stuff and going through that, and I coach him on the anatomical medical rehab stuff. And together, it just creates a better platform for the people that come through the door to work with us and progress and stay on the fitness train, because yeah, injuries happen. So it's amazing how people's mindset changes, whether it's to, we've just come off the back of January, so it's a perfect time to talk about the New Year's resolution hype. I think you did a podcast on it not so long ago,
Yeah,
didn't you?
yeah,
And one niggle, one bit of pain, and people just completely fall off that fitness train because they're hurt. And if we were able to sort of mitigate that and prevent that, then that's the win.
yeah, yeah. I think the PTs, movement coaches, speaking the same language as physios and having that sort of full spectrum, rehab to performance kind of offering, I think is really cool. And so is the movement room one-on-one stuff, or you do group classes as well?
Yeah,
Or
yeah. So it's the whole lot. Yeah. So we do small group personal training. So classes up to 8 in the class is a bit more bespoke feel to them classes, and
yeah,
there's various classes. So strength and fitness, strength and mobility, mobility specific. We do some runners conditioning stuff as well as some like more higher heart rate, high intensity conditioning stuff as well. I think we've got about 30 plus classes running in a week now. And I think
wow,
about 45, 50 members. It's quite cool. It's good. It's
yeah,
a hell of a journey. I just really enjoy creating a bit of community. It's something that I've always wanted, was a real community feel within a gym space, and create this little close knit of like-minded individuals. And yeah, very, very, very proud of that space, especially
I
setting
think,
up in such a difficult time.
yeah,
Uh,
for sure. And I think that is a real key for people continuing on with their sort of rehab, prehab stuff, or just movement, strength training, is having an outlet that, maybe isn't as expensive as doing one-on-one treatment or one-on-one
yeah,
training, but they still get, some expert coaching or someone overviewing things. They get the community aspect, which has so many benefits, but one of which is just, the consistency and a level of accountability, I suppose, coming along
yeah,
each week
100%.
to a class. And so that's actually something that we are doing this year, focusing on this year, is we've got our own little community space that we're about to inhabit, and we'll be running
Cool.
regular classes, feet and balance, and then that way we can work with practitioners locally. And, if someone does get to that sort of pain-free state and they don't want to keep, spending $150 a session with a practitioner, then we can sort of help bridge that gap and keep them going, but at, much more affordably and in that community setting, which I think is really amazing.
Yeah, I think that's like should be the new age approach to physio and rehab and working with personal trainers and small group personal training gyms. I think that approach to having it all under one roof and included within a package is a very good model. And I think people then are happy to talk. We have a little app where we have networks, and if people are picking up niggles and stuff, we reprogram what we're coaching to help mitigate that on a broader spectrum. If people are training within the gym setting and there's a few grumbly backs, or there's a few hips, or maybe hamstrings, or grips, or forearms, or whatever it may be, that we kind of plan and change to meet our members' needs, so that they're constantly trying to strengthen their weak links and keep on that cycle and that fitness train, because it's habitual change and it happens over time. And I think it's a shame when people are left in the dark with an injury because they've just been working hard with a personal trainer or working hard on their own in the gym setting, and they pick up a niggle and they just go, damn,
Yeah,
I'll stop.
Yeah, for sure. Well, cool, man. I love the sound of what you're doing, and I'm looking forward to witnessing it. And when we're coming over in the UK, to the UK is the plan for September. So it'd be really cool to connect in person and see your space. And just
100%. Likewise.
I think what you're doing is really great, and highly recommend anyone listening, if you are in actually, where are you actually based? In London, but whereabouts?
No, Manchester. So north
Manchester.
Of England.
Okay.
Yeah,
okay.
So in the northwest of England, so South Manchester way, but further from that in Lim is where the movement room at SJC Physio is based.
Okay, my England geography is obviously different.
Mate, you're coming over soon. Don't worry. Everyone from Australia just knows London. Anything north of London is like the north, and then you've got the lakes, and then apart from that, it's Scotland.
I just thought Manchester was in London. No, that's cool. Well, anyone listening, and obviously if you go onto the TFC Pro Directory, you'll see Sam on there. Just again, thanks for your time, mate. It's been really cool to chat. And
thanks for having me on. Honestly, long time coming, but it's been a good one. I've enjoyed it.
Yeah, cool. Thanks for listening, everyone. We'll catch you on the next episode.
Take care, guys.
Thanks for tuning in to the Restore to Explore podcast. If you enjoyed the episode, we'd really appreciate you leaving a review wherever you're listening. That's the best way to support us and to help us reach more people. If you're after more free TFC education or training, looking for any of our TFC tools, natural footwear discounts, or you want specialized guidance on your foot health journey from a trusted TFC health professional, head to thefootcollective.com. All of the important links are in the show notes of the episode.